Last week we posted a mock draft, but this time we wanted to dive a little deeper into the prospects. So this week, all three of us here at LeagueBound are going to give our rankings for the top 30 prospects in this year's draft. It's kind of like a big board, but we won't include guys who we think have more second round or two-way value since it'll just be the first round essentially. But it should give more insight to how we view these guys individually. And as always, if you enjoy the video, remember to subscribe as we're going to keep the draft content coming all year long. Here is my big board for the 2026 draft cycle. I think for the top four, it's the usual suspects, AJ DeBonsa and Darren Peterson are guys who I feel like can just be that next tier of score, or at least they have the highest ceiling to reach that. Typically, I think I would be higher on Peterson, but just with the season he had this year, I wanted to respect DeBonsa's body of work. I think he showed real flashes as a playmaker. I think there are times he just needed to be more consistent with that, but nonetheless, I think he has the ability at the next level to be a guy who's consistently shifting defenses and just being the number one guy on a contending team. Peterson, at the very least, I think he had real issues with some of the playmaking stuff, and obviously he had an odd year. But even without that, I think there's a real chance he's just one of the best shooters in the draft, let alone scorers. And I'm really high on the overall defensive value that he has. If he can maximize his ceiling, which I think he'll have the chance to, just because he's going to get the ball in his hands no matter where he goes. I still think that the ceiling is extremely high, and there's a chance he's the best player in this class. Boozer. Now, he does everything at a really high level. All I'm going to say is everything that Karl Anthony Towns is doing in this playoff run, I think Boozer has the capability to replicate those as well. Caleb Wilson is a guy who he's really athletic, but I think he just needs to polish out some of the finesse skill and some of the defensive awareness. But outside of that, I still think he has the floor to be a force in this league. So my number 5 through 10, this is where things get pretty interesting for me, because I think there's some guys here like Mikal and Kingston, I think have real all-star potential. I think for some of these guys after them, I see them more as guys who could just be high-level starters per se. Brown and Flemings, I think for point guards specifically, especially when you're short, you need to have that intersect of skill and athleticism, I think most times, unless you're Steph Curry, who just has an outlier shooting ability. I think Brown and Flemings, for their size and the position they play, I think that they both have that, and so I feel higher on them maybe reaching that all-star potential than some of the guys after them. Yaxel Lindeborg, for one, I don't really see him as a all-star caliber player per se, but I think he's a guy who just has a really high floor as a starter, and I think he's a guy who's just going to be a very valuable starter on a contending team just because he does literally everything. I know Cameron has something to say about that, so we'll see what he says. Wagler, he's another guy who I like. He has the feel, he's really skilled, but I think a lot of it does just rely on how he develops physically. And Acuff, I think he's going to be a very impactful offensive player. It's just the defense is really going to determine how easily he can kind of become that all-star level player. But I think one thing that does bode well for him is that he's a very strong guard, to where it's a possibility he does become kind of that all-star caliber player, even if the defense is just bad throughout his whole career. Adai is still part of that 5 through 10 of the high-level starter, but I think 11 through 20 is more guys who I see as starters and high-end rotation players. So Hannes Steinbach, a guy who can rebound, has really good offensive touch. He can attack other bigs and overpower you at times, and plus there's a possibility he becomes a real stretch big. Braden Burries is another guy, another do-it-all guard. I think the big thing for him is just what does he look like when he has the ball in his hands more often. And then LeBaron Philon and Bennett Sturts are guys who I'm they definitely have ways that they could grow, but if I wanted to draft them to a team that I was starting a rebuild with, I would feel pretty comfortable taking these guards. And Philon, I would kind of put him in that upper tier of guard, but the main thing is just some of the size, and he's not really that athletic. But Sturts is a guy he's skilled offensively, and he's versatile in the sense that he can have the ball in his hands, but also he's comfortable playing with movement and playing off of movement. And then Carr and Swain, Cameron Carr is a guy who he's a very high level shooter. He has the athleticism, and I think he has the wingspan to be a very effective defender, though I know he hasn't shown that. Swain is another guy who can get his own bucket, 6'8", he has a nice size. And I think he has kind of like a Jaden McDaniels-y outcome, Jaden McDaniels-y outcome. But I think defensively he does still have some room to grow. Quaintance and Morez Johnson, I kind of see very similar. Quaintance, if he didn't have the knee stuff, I would probably put him up higher. But I think with the knee concerns, it makes sense to kind of keep him in the same range. Both are guys who are very high-level defenders and can also finish plays defensively, but they are limited players. Graves is another guy who does a lot of things, but I think he's just athletically limited. And then Ament and Kareem Lopez are also guys who I think could be high-level contributors, but I don't think that they really have much more of a ceiling than what they've already shown. And then Christian Anderson and Ibuka Corey are guys who I'm really comfortable leading the backup unit. Chris Sinak and Koa Pete are guys who I like the tools, but I feel like they're just more raw compared to some of the other players I would take ahead of them. And then Taurus Reed and Henry Visar, these are guys who are a little bit older, but I'm kind of comfortable taking them near the end because I think they could be kind of like a Ryan Kalkbrenner or Musa Diabate, not in how they play, but in kind of what they are for the Hornets, because you see how they have pieces that they have at pretty much every other position, but you can draft them because they provide value in the front court and they can kind of be that bridge piece if you do want to find something that's more viable in the long term. And then Malik Thomas and Isaiah Evans I see as pretty similar players, but I think Thomas is a little bit more dynamic with the ball, so that's why I kind of have him a little bit higher. And then Zubi Ejiofor, he's an undersized center, but I think he can guard and give you some good minutes off the bench.
Okay, so to start out my big board here, a couple weeks before the NBA draft, I think, Brandon, we've got the same top four: AJ DeBonta, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson. Similar reasons to what you laid out. I feel like DeBonta, of everybody, is as high of a floor as any of the prospects in this class, but the ceiling is like best player on a championship team, so has to go at number one. But I mean, it's a slight edge over a guy like Peterson, who, if his health is completely fixed from what we saw in college, if he's a guy that you can rely upon to be your top scorer for 65 plus games in a regular season. I mean, we saw when he was healthy, he was one of the best players in college basketball. So really think him and DeBonta were battling neck and neck for that top spot, but DeBonta does have that slight edge due to the size and the potential defensive upside as well. I think if he can unlock part of that as his game, I know he's more of an offensive player, but the ability to guard small forward, but maybe shift up or down in a lineup, I think provides a lot of value. So DeBonta at one for me. But one big difference that jumps out compared to yours, Brandon, is I have Darius Acuff Jr. as my next best guard after Darren Peterson. I get the defensive lapses and the just flat out inability to be a defender that he showed this year at Arkansas, but the offensive generation and the accolades that he put together in one season with the Razorbacks, I mean, doing stuff in the SEC that hasn't been done since Pistol Pete, who was one of the greatest college players of all time. So if you've got your name next to him in the record books, I mean, that you have to get credit for that. So I think if his floor is Trae Young, a guy that's made all-star games in the past, yeah, he just got moved because he was kind of bleeding value at a certain point in these rotations for the Atlanta Hawks. But for a while, I mean, Trae Young was seen as one of the better point guards in the NBA. So if Darius Acuff can at least reach that as like what you project to be a decent hit as his floor, but then you look at his ceiling, right? You look at a guy like Damian Lillard, someone like Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving, some of those undersized guards that are offensive juggernauts. It's tough for me to say that some of these other guards should just automatically be above him from the production that he showed as a freshman. So I've got him there at number 5, but not too far behind him. Kingston Flemings, Michael Brown, Keaton Wagler. You kind of have that bunch of guards. It's just kind of a personal preference, I think, for a lot of people who you have at the top of that list. But Flemings and Michael Brown, showed some good things at their respective schools this year. But I've got Keaton Wagler at the bottom of there. I don't think I've brought it up on the podcast yet, but I have had worries at times this season that he could be the Johnny Davis of this year's draft class, just a guy that had a lot of production, but for whatever reason, depending on the situation that he gets drafted to, just doesn't develop into that Devin Booker type scoring guard that you were hoping for. So Keaton Wagler, I think, is one of the biggest boom or bust players alongside Darius Acuff in this guard group, because if it doesn't work out, I mean, you're sitting in a draft class with this much talent and wondering, how did we end up with the one guy or one of the two guys in the top 10 that doesn't become a really good player? So I have some concerns about Keaton Wagler with his speed and his ability to create at the next level. That's why I have him kind of at the bottom of that group of 4 next best guards. And then another guy that I think maybe is a little bit high in my big board is Cameron Carr. Got him inside my top 10. He showed a lot of cool stuff this year with Baylor, but then you look at the way he completely dominated the NBA draft combine. Obviously, some of the guys he was competing with were not top talent in this draft, but to me, that just showed the right mentality from Cameron Carr to go out there and continue to prove that not only should he be a first round pick, but he is one of the best players in this class. He's got the 3-point shot. He's got the length to potentially be a two-way player. And I honestly think if he goes to the right system, he could probably be a guy that makes all rookie first team from this class. He's got that type of scoring talent from the outside. And I'd like to see a coach unlock more of his game as he continues to develop. After that, I think the next best big is probably Adai Mara. He sits similar to Brandon's, right in there at number 10. He's just a massive human being, really good on both ends. It's going to be hard to stop, even if he becomes Zach Edey. I mean, we saw Edey do some good things with Memphis so far in his career prior to injuries. So wouldn't be shocked if he becomes somebody that's a top 10 player. Someone who's a bit higher on mine than yours, Brandon, Kareem Lopez. I've actually been watching a little bit more of his stuff over the past week. I know some of the comments have talked about how much they like Kareem Lopez in the previous mock drafts. And he has the flashes to be one of the better players out of this draft class. I think at his size, to be able to shoot the ball and also attack the rim, we've seen some plays where he literally just holds the ball over the defenders and just throws it down. And at that young of an age overseas, to be able to do that and get minutes in these rotations, you have to give him credit for it. I don't have him inside my top 10 because I think he could be another one of these boom or bust players, depending on the situation and the coaching that he gets. How much minutes is he going to get in the early career to develop and get accustomed to the NBA level? So just outside the top 10, but definitely has the tools to not necessarily become Giannis Antetokounmpo, but you think of a player like that had a lot of question marks, had a lot of growth to do coming into the NBA, but you draft him late in the lottery and he becomes your team's best player. I think there's a slight chance that Kareem Lopez has the ability to do so. All these guys, though, outside the top 10, heading toward the late teens, I think are at least rotation players at the next level. Yaxel Lendeborg, maybe a little bit lower than some people have. I have him right behind LeBaron Philon. Just two guys that I think, regardless of what team drafts them, they have the skill set to make an impact right away. Nate Ament, still up there inside the top 15, kind of like Kareem Lopez, has the tools that we flash on tape, but the consistency was kind of the big question mark. Wasn't able to show it for a full season at Tennessee. Had some high points, but I think his development is a little bit more of a longer track than some of the guys ahead of him. Some other bigs around this range, Hannes Steinbach and Chris Sinak. I liked what Steinbach did in terms of production, but I still have Sinak up this high because of the high ceiling for him. I liked the ability to show the 3-point shot, especially late in the season when the most important games were happening. He was able to step out and space the floor. That's something that provides immense value from bigs at the NBA level. Morez Johnson, kind of like what you said, Brandon, with the physicality on both ends. Inside my top 20, a little bit ahead of Jaden Quaintance, just because you have to tax Quaintance for the health issues. When he's healthy, he's dominant. When he's not, I mean, that's the concern, drafting him higher than somewhere around the 20s range. So if he does slide to that point in a draft, I think that could be a really high value pick for some of these teams that are just outside of playoff contention. But for on the big board, I have to tax him a little bit down to 20. Then after the top 20 here, starting at 21 through about maybe 27, 28, these are guys that I think are probably going to have to become specialists of some sort at the next level in order to get to kind of a second contract. You think of Dalen Swain, the size and the positional versatility that he has. If he can just specifically lock in on a three-point shot or some aspect of his game to become a master of one thing, that's where I think these guys start to get the most value. Like Isaiah Evans and Malik Thomas grouped up kind of like your board, Brandon. Just two guys that have multiple skills, but at the next level, I don't think they're getting drafted to be starters or to be franchise changers. I think they get drafted to have one or two skills that they can master and provide value off the bench or in kind of these spot start scenarios throughout the regular season. And then after around 27 or 28, these are just kind of some older players that had a lot of production at the college level and I think are definitely NBA ready. You think of Joshua Jefferson, Terrace Reed, a little bit lower on Allen Graves as he kind of rounds out my top 30 just because of the physicality and the athleticism I'm not a huge fan of. I know the stats and the analytics maybe point his way with the defensive ability, but the jump shot and the foot speed, that's something that I could see if a team overreaches and drafts him inside the top 20 or inside the top 16. That could be something that's a limiting factor for him and ends up just not living up to his draft value. So I've got him a little bit lower than maybe some do, but that kind of wraps up my top 30.
I am up next with my big board, and same as you guys. I have AJ at 1. To me, he's just been like the best player in the class for a while. I think Darren kind of made a push towards the end of his senior year where you could probably say he was definitely a little bit better at the end of their senior year. However, I think AJ's year in college was very consistent. He scored a ton of points, and to me, he just barely edges out the next two guys. However, as time is going on, I've seen things from all three of these guys that, like, I'm glad I'm not the Wizards. I wouldn't know what to do. All three of these guys are very solid guys to pick at 1. I've even come around on like Cam Boozer being a potential 1 guy, especially because, like, which I know I don't want to take too much from the video, but it does look like he's cutting down on weight a little bit. And to me, I was always someone who was very adamant that I think he should be trying to be a 4-3 instead of a 4-5 at the next level. At the NBA, he's just a little too short to be a consistent 5. And I think his game, especially if you watch him in high school, he has a lot of skill that he necessarily didn't get to show at Duke as much. Like, I think he has a little bit more of an ISO game than what he showed, which he still showed a little bit, but I just think there's a lot more that we didn't get to see. And if he slims down and can play that like 4-3 and then sometimes 5 against smaller guys, I think he could be like very, very valuable. So I'm really high on all three of these guys. It's almost a tie for me at 1, but I think AJ, if it was me, he's just like my type of player a lot. So I would say AJ is slightly edging the other two. Darren, he also looks like he's back to moving like himself before Kansas. Like in the videos we've seen pre-draft, we found out what the issue was. It was with like the full body cramping. It was like a creatine overdose basically. And to me, that's not something that like worries me in particular. So for him, I'm perfectly fine taking him at 1 as well. He's just a ridiculous shot maker and scorer. And in high school, if you go back and watch that tape, he's way more explosive than when he looked at Kansas. And he has way better vision than when he showed at Kansas, which I think is partially because of his role that he was asked to play alongside guys like Council and a pretty weirdly constructed Kansas team, to be honest. So I'm interested to see what he looks like. I think he's going to do well anywhere. Those top 3 guys are definitely my first tier. I think those are guys that I project all to be all-stars. Then Caleb Wilson, I just have in a little separate tier below them. And I think he almost gets there. Like, he's so good to me. Like, he is a real defender. Didn't really show it last year in college, to be honest. But, like, if you go back in high school, he just wrecked things on defense. And I think, like, the motor is there, the effort is there. Sometimes being in the right place isn't always there. I think that's something that can be coached. You can't really coach the motor. So I'm glad he has that. He was a way more efficient scorer than even I thought he was going to be last year in college. He averaged 19 points on 57% shooting from the floor. I was just impressed with his year. overall. Then we get to this run of guards. And I'm closer to Jake on the guards as far as having A Cup first. To me, he's just, if we're projecting any of these guards to be all-stars, I think he's the closest to it already. And I think he has the projectable skills to get there. I think a lot of the narratives around A Cup, around like being like a smaller guard, were a little bit overblown, as we saw at the combine. Him and Kingston are pretty much the same height. Michael's like an inch taller than them. Wagler's a lot bigger, but I think like the athleticism question, I don't want to take too much into this like the sprint testing at the combine, but he did finish ahead of Flemings, which I don't think most people would have guessed. He really does have burst. He gets by people. I just think he plays with pace, so it doesn't always show up on tape. He doesn't need to like run full speed to get past someone. So I don't know. I just think all around he has the most skills. Like he's one of the best passers. He's one of the more consistent shooters. He has the NBA ready body. He has long arms. I just think he's kind of everything you want in a guard. So he's my number one guard prospect outside of like Darren Peterson, obviously. Wagler is my next guy. I'm a little higher on him than I think you guys are. I just think he's such a smooth player, and guys like him just work. I think we're seeing that a lot in the playoffs this year. Like guys like Vassell, guys like Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, Shea, like guys like this 6'6" guard who can kind of do everything, shoot, play make, has good vision, I think works in the NBA. And I'm just really impressed with the fact that he didn't even play like any high-level shoe circuit in high school. And he was able to come in right away, take the starting job at Illinois ahead of Colin Boswell, who's been there a while. Like he kind of moved him off ball, kind of took over that team, and like literally in less than a year, he'll be going from playing non-elite level shoe basketball to being in the NBA. To me, that's like a guy I have to bet on. Like, I'm sorry, especially at that measurements, with that skill level, that shooting ability, he's a guy I bet on. Michael Brown Jr., he's like in that conversation, almost all like guys you can project being all-star guards. I think if you just like in your head think of like skill by skill, he's probably really high up there. Michael, though, like it didn't really materialize last year. Like he didn't shoot it the best. The shot selection was questionable at times. The defense we saw at like pre-college when he played for USA, didn't really see it last year besides like one game where he had a bunch of steals. I just can't really, I believe it's there. I believe like he's somebody who could potentially be an all-star one day. I just need to see it a little bit more than what I saw it last year. So, but I still have him 7, kind of speeding this up here. Flemings, he's just all around good. Like measurement, like arm length, I really don't care about. Like he's somebody I spotted from the beginning of the year. Like he's really good. He gets to spots, he gets downhill, he can play with multiple guards. I think he's just kind of fits anywhere. Mara at 9, I think one spot higher than both of you guys. Like he's just really huge. Great passer, good feel. He's not like the Wemby. Like I've heard like people are like Thunder should take him to like go against Wemby. That wouldn't go well. He does not move that great and like can't cover in space that well. But I think for some team he's gonna be like a really good center that is like a change-up option you put with some other guys that he can start or he can come off the bench and he'll just be impactful. Phylon, someone I have high. To me, we seen him be like a real, like closer to his NBA role his first year in college. And then his second year in college, we saw like a real scoring explosion, him potentially being like a number one option. I like my guys who are going to be role players to have that in their bag, like somebody who can create their own shot when things break down. So he's someone I have really high, and he's like the same age as Burries, so I think I'll take that experience over Burries. Burries, what can I say? He's just a winner, man. NBA ready body, great all around guard. I think he'll be in the league for a long time. Nate Ament, I have him a little bit higher. As I went back and watched the tape, he's someone who, like, he's a little ways away, but I just think there's so much upside there. I would bet on it. Cameron Carr, Jake, you kind of explained it best. Real shooter. Showed a lot at Baylor. Just wanted to see the defense get there a little bit, but he has all the tools for it. Now the Yaxel Linden board. This is someone I have a little bit lower than you guys do. I think Branden, if we're just talking about skills, I agree with you. He's like a top 10 player, skill-wise. However, just a quick list here. Really quick tangent. I looked up at his age. He is older than all of Paolo Banchero, Brandon Miller, Jonathan Kuminga, Jabari Smith, Shaedon Sharp, and Keontae George. That's just like, he's somewhere between a couple months and a year older than all those guys. He's 2 years older than Anthony Black, Miles Buzelis, and Stephon Castle. He's 4 years older than Cooper Flagg. Ace Bailey, Trey Johnson, Caleb Wilson, and Nate Mint. He's 5 years older, which means in a regular, like over the course of a regular high school career, he would not even be in school with these guys. Like they wouldn't even go to high school together. He's older by 5 years almost than Cam Boozer and Chris Sinak. However good you are, you're kind of supposed to be that good. When you're that old, playing against talent that is that young, you really have to dominate. And to his credit, he kind of did last year. He played really, really well. However, especially if I'm like one of these lottery teams, I would rather take the bet on the younger player, surpassing. I don't think the gap between him skill-wise and some of the other guys that I mentioned before him are that big to where they can't catch up age for age-wise. By the time they're his age, some of these guys will undoubtedly be all-stars, potentially all NBA players when you talk about the top of the class. So while I expect him to produce on his rookie contract fairly well, I think he'll be plug and play for if he goes to a good team. I can't take him above some of these other guys who have a lot more potential and a lot more time and runway to get where they're going to go. Just to speed through the back half here, Merez Johnson, I think he just does everything really big, athletic. I think when you compare him to Quayton's, they're similar. He's about a year older, but I think he produced a lot more in his time in college. He shot 34% from three, which isn't terrible, but it was on really low volume. Quayton's only shot 18%. So I think, and his free throws are a lot more promising. On more attempts, he shot 78% from free throw last year. Quayton shot 30, and he shot 47 the year before that. I think if you're projecting one of these guys as shooters going forward, I think Merez definitely has that edge. Hans, rebounder, some shooting promise. Chris Sinak, I just think has a lot of tools and great size. Dalen Swain, versatile wing. Chris Anderson, Cole Pete, Kareem Lopez, Malik Thomas. All these guys are guys I think could potentially be starters one day, but most likely slot in as bench players for most of their careers. I think that goes all the way down to probably Isaiah Evans. From him down, so Bilko Corey, Bennett starts, Zubair Shore, Henry Vasar and Tyrese Reed, Baba Miller. I think these are all guys who are probably career bench players, maybe swinging up and down between the G League and NBA for most of their careers. I think if I had to bet on any of these guys, I really like Okoye. I think he has some elite skills to maybe get into a starting lineup, but he is really small. And I think Christian Anderson, I would take above him because he can shoot.